Okay, so here we go. Thank you all for sticking around. This is going to be a really important discussion because now we've seen the big picture, but we have to bring it home. And this is what we have an opportunity to do that right now. So first, let me introduce our panel, and I'm not going to go down this way. I'm going to go for my piece of paper. Mace Crowbear. Mace is right here. You want to? Mace works with the Restorative Justice Center in the DA's office. She's a mediator at the Conflict Resolution Center, a member of the Santa Cruz Community Health Board of Directors, and a member of the Housing Matters Speakers Bureau. Chris Field, is also a member of the Housing Matters Speakers Bureau. And I want to note that Chris and Mace each have many years of experience living unhoused in the Santa Cruz community and have made a courageous commitment to tell their stories and share their wisdom in a variety of venues, including this panel tonight. We also have with us Shebra Kalantari Johnson, who is the Vice Mayor of the City of Santa Cruz and a member of the Housing for Health Policy Board. And I should pause here to say that the Housing for Health entity is what we have heard in the film as was called the Continuum of Care. That is our county's Continuum of Care body that coordinates services for our county, services and programs in our county. So Shebra is also, in addition to being vice mayor, is also a member of that board. Sandy Brown, is a former city council member and currently an analyst in the office of County Supervisor Justin Cummings. And Sandy is here representing Supervisor Cummings, who was not able to join us tonight. And last but not least of our new panel, new members, Jessica Shiner, who is a manager in the Housing for Health Division. And the Housing for Health Division is part of that Housing for Health partnership that is our COC, and her agency's major focus is both providing and coordinating services for folks experiencing homelessness in our county. And you have met our two filmmakers. Thank you, Don. So thank you all for joining us. I have a quick request as we begin that we do have a fairly large panel, so we do hope that each time you speak to keep your comments fairly succinct, but we do want to hear from you, so let's dive in. I'm going to start with a question for Shebra and Sandy and Jessica. After seeing the film, what's your initial response to the strategies presented, and what are some of the ways that the city and the county and the Housing for Health team are working together to create a comprehensive approach, and can we expand on that? So, Shebra, you want to go first?
That's an easy question. First, I want to thank you for the film and for coming to our community and engaging our community in this conversation. Yes.
Oh, pleasure.
That's a big question. The film is of course about housing first as an evidence-based model, and the city. It's hard to. Let me just give a brief background. I've worked in the field of homelessness, so it's hard to not have that hat on and just have my city vice mayor hat on. But the city does prescribe to housing first and recognizes and believes that as an evidence-based practice. There was a piece of the film that a theme that kept coming up that was around partnership and collaboration that really stuck with me. And I think that is key to making this model work. And a reflection that I'm having is that in our community, in our small community of Santa Cruz County, we are very collaborative. We say that we are collaborative, and I think we are collaborative, but it often tends to be transactional collaboration. And in order for this model to work, we need to shift from transactional collaboration to transformational, synergistic collaboration. And if we have the chance, I can have an opportunity if we have that chance, I can share one example of how I think we have done that. I'm looking at Jessica, because we worked on the Youth Homeless Demonstration Program, which I think is a good example of how we moved from transactional to transformational. But there's others who can speak. Oh, you have a mic.
Oh, I have one.
Okay.
May I borrow? Thank you. So I agree with Shabra's comments about the transactional nature of collaboration. And, I would say the challenge with that is that when things aren't working, if there's a problem, or we don't have enough resources, whatever the big challenges and the smaller ones, that falls apart, right? So it really does need to be based on, real meaningful engagement and I think trust, and that's something that has been missing over the years. And that's been kind of structural, like kind of baked into our city-county relations over the years, and so I'm glad to see that we are making great strides. And I just a couple of reactions. First, thank you. I just can't say how much I needed this, and I think a lot of people today, in this moment that we're in, you brought the humanity. I mean, just the idea that empathy and dignity, and really meaning that when we engage with others in our community and not those folks because they may be different, right? Because they may have different, whatever it might be, behaviors, their, life experiences. We other our unhoused neighbors, and to me, that's not okay. And I want to see a community, and I think I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here, but we have to get at that fundamental challenge. In terms, I want to say one thing about the prospects for the kinds of collaborations, because I do think that we have a major resource challenge, as the communities that you visited did, and so we've got to get creative. And in this time, we know we cannot count on the federal government. I wish I could say, we could actually, with our federal tax dollars, house every person in the United States. And the political condition of our nation right now it makes it impossible. But we can work at the community level. And so we're, some of the things that Shebra's been talking about, and I hope we'll hear more, coming together to try to go after funding from the state and from the federal government, if that continues to exist, and really being at the same table, right? Not like that's what we have to do. And so I want to encourage my city colleagues or partners now, no longer colleagues, but colleagues in a different way, to participate in those conversations. I think with Housing for Health, with the partnership, you're going to be able to speak to what that looks like in practice. So I went on too long, but I had so many things going in my head. I just wanted to say those things and hear more about, like, practically speaking, what those partnerships can do. Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. Jessica?
Thanks. So first, I just want to thank you so much for making this film. I looked at the website, and somebody had said, this is saying everything that I wanted to say and what I want to tell people. And whew, I feel like that it's what I wanted to say. And so thank you so much. And I think, Dawn, your question was around a plan to move forward in all of us. And that is what Housing for Health is trying to do, is to create a plan, and we do it, is to create a plan about how we can all move together forward. And together doesn't mean city of Santa Cruz and county. It means county, north, south, mid, up, down. It means community agencies. It means businesses. It means people. It means the people themselves, the people with the knowledge, the people that it means everybody. And what I loved about this movie, and it gets to the plan, is that we know how to do this. We know how to do this, and in Santa Cruz County, we've proven that we can do it. We have proven that if you provide housing supports, you provide services, you provide dignity, you listen to the people you're working with, you work with folks on their goals, not on my goals, but on their goals. And we work together and we try and get rid of barriers. We can do this. We know how to do this. And it's just so cool to sort of see people in the audience and like all of the people that have worked together towards this. And so thank you. I just so glad you came.
Thanks, Jessica. So next I want to turn to Mace and Chris and ask you, two things. One, after seeing the movie, how do you think Santa Cruz is doing on all this? And how can we incorporate the expertise of people with lived experience of homelessness to be more fully involved in developing effective solutions?
Thank you. I like to say the first thing about this film is I was like, you see me. You see me. You know how long I was invisible, how long I fell through the cracks. I was a child that was homeless, and then I was a teenager that was homeless, and then I was an adult that was homeless. And you know what the common thing is? That I was raised and born and understood that I was less than. I was never told I was going to go to college. I never told that I would become anything. And repetition and breaking that cycle. So thank you for this film again, because it touched my heart. And I was assaulted in these shelters by staff. And I was told that I was scared. I was safer sleeping in my van with my children than I was in the shelter. So when you were talking about that, that really touched me. I am seeing such improvement with the programs here and seeing them actually get out there and having people that actually have been homeless and have that experience reaching out, because that's truly to solve the issue is really doing that. And also to mental health. I am so scared still to this day that my mental health will affect my children and us being homeless again. And that's a reality. No matter how high I climb, I still have to remember like that's always going to be in here. And mental health is a huge part of our solution here. Is really is helping people maintain it and be able to navigate the system. Because right now we can't put $10,000 towards a rental, and not, it's in ridiculous prices. We can't climb. We can't climb. If I make a penny more, I lose everything. I lose my housing, I lose everything. And I'm homeless again. So we have to make their solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
Thank you, Mace. And gentlemen, thank you. I want to reiterate all the gratitude. It was awesome. Really good movie. Poignant. And before I answer that question, I just want to, I wrote down a few caveats from the film. Actually, before that, it was, Don said, broken systems persist. And then we need kindness and compassion, that's for sure. Also, a person in shelter is still homeless. He has no home. Let people battle their demons indoors like everybody else. Yeah. If you don't want affordable housing in your backyard, you're going to have homeless in your front yard. Yeah. Also, hostility, unmistakably real. And that sure was my experience. Thankfully, I'm no longer on the streets. My story, very, very just briefly, I'll say I had a riches to rags scenario, and one incident, one altercation changed the course of my life. And I never thought I'd have to be on the streets and learn how to survive in that way, ever. Never thought that could be possible. But what I've seen are just some of the worst things and also some of the best things. You know, humanity exists, people really help each other out, there's a lot of kindness, but there's a lot of pressure as well. I think Santa Cruz is doing okay, you know. There's obviously still quite an issue, if I can call it that. Really what I think needs to happen is more funding and services for mental health and also for alcohol and drug addiction. I mean, really, there aren't enough treatment centers. There really isn't. There's Janus and there's New Life, and that's it. So I would encourage the county to invest more in those areas. But also, I see like simple, easy solutions, sort of like, make parking lots safe zones, because a lot of people live in their cars here. I think that would be a great idea. Encourage that. Also, tiny homes, build tiny homes, little cities of tiny homes with social workers, because that's quick, affordable, and also you could use modular homes. Also, like buildings that are not being used in Santa Cruz, and there are a number. I really believe that could be a part of the solution. Anyway, I have more, but I realize there's time pressing, but thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll be back around. So, Don and Tim, next you're up. So you've traveled across the whole country and seen a ton of different communities and seen what they're doing. And now you're getting a little glimpse of what's happening here in Santa Cruz. And what are you hearing and seeing here that seems either the same or different from what you're seeing in other communities?
It's not a camera question. So.
You are not unique, not in any way at all. All the way from the city, county, tension, all the way down to service providers siloed. But on the surface of all of it, there is conversation that can be interpreted as collaboration. But the kind of deep collaboration that a community needs to deal with this issue, rarely a community gets to that level. It's not the fault of the intentions of the people who are working in the field. It is the fault of the way the system was set up before they ever even got there. The system is not set up for collaboration. It's not set up to end homelessness. It's a service industry. So for a service industry to survive, it has to have customers. And I mean, just brutally honestly, you need a supply of homeless folks to have that industry continue. And that's what it's set up to do. The communities that have success are the ones that sit back for a minute and they look at everyone who's working on this issue and they're like, you're doing this, you're doing that. Everybody's working for the same outcome in completely different ways because of the way the system is set up. And they look back, they take a long enough moment to say that that's insane. It's never going to succeed. And then they look at each other and they say, we can fix this. So you don't have to trash the system totally. You just have to intervene into it and make the system make sense. Change the mission outcome to actually ending homelessness, and housing ends homelessness. Services keeps people in the housing. It's evidence-based, it's proven. Everything that you saw in the film is all proven outcomes. So then what's the issue? You ask the question, what do you see? I see that you guys have every piece in place to be the next big story coming out about a community that has ended homelessness. You have everything in place. So this is just a will, a political will, a people will. It's kind of, aren't you tired of the failure? Just get being tired of it and actually work together. I'm Jim Matthey from Milwaukee in the film, he's on a lot of our panels around the country, and he asks this question of he's like, and of elected officials, business people, what can happen for no extra money? And then when you have to look at it that way, and you look at each other, and who's doing what really well, and who could just lose that they don't do very well, who over here does what you're weak in, and that's how collaboration works. The last thing I'll say is, time.
Yeah,
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay. The last thing I'll say is it's not easy. These guys, they have the same problems. You guys, again, you're not unique, but what they did in Milwaukee is they had, the sheriff, the police department, judicial system, nonprofits, faith-based, healthcare, philanthropy, once a week, 2 hours a day, or 2 hours every meeting, once a week for 18 months, just to make sure they stayed on track and they were hitting their goals. The thing that most communities do is they come to a place where everybody's tired, and they say, okay, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this, and they all walk away, and nothing is monitored to see if it's really working out or if it has unintended consequences. So, long answer to say this: you guys can absolutely do it.
It's not a camera question. But no, Don covered it pretty nicely, yeah.
Somebody out there said tell the truth, so.
So I have a question from the audience, but I want to circle back to one thing that came up a little bit, where there was an example, I think you were talking about, of something where there was that kind of deeper collaboration. It's, without going into great depth, I wonder if you could share a little bit about that, maybe whoever was part of that.
Sure. I see actually many people here who are part of that. This is the Youth Homeless Demonstration Program. We were one of 10 across the nation to be the first cohort to receive HUD grant to address youth and young adult homelessness, transition age youth under the age of 25. And so what we did differently is we invited partners that you wouldn't necessarily think about, like MA, the museum was a partner, and many others. We had youth with lived experience who were not just at the meetings, but they were really guiding and leading and facilitating how we would proceed with our year-long strategic planning process, and then with the allocation of the, I think, $2.2 million that HUD gave us. So they were really leading the efforts. What that caused was for all of our organizations to really come together, and when there were funding opportunities, we partnered rather than compete with each other around funding, and that brought in other dollars. We had a Cal OES grant, we had a HHS grant, we had millions and millions of more dollars come in towards this effort because we weren't competing against each other. We were really a YHDP collaborative going for these dollars. And long story short, the TAY population was 30% of our point-in-time count when we applied for these grants in, I think, 2017. I'm looking at Jessica. And within 3 years, we decreased that by 60%. So it's telling in the numbers that we were doing things differently. So when Jessica says it's possible, we've done it with this subpopulation. We can do it with our whole community.
Great, thanks. Jessica, do you want to say any more about that? Okay, so here's the million-dollar question for anyone any of you who have thoughts on it. And that, first, the preface question that they added at the bottom was, will you do a film about the affordable housing crisis? Okay, but with that preface, I will say I'm going to paraphrase the question a little bit, but what do we do when we're trying to do a housing-first approach in a community where there is just such a shortage of affordable housing right now? And I don't think anyone in this room would disagree that we have a huge crisis. So how do we overcome that barrier and also how do we work with that reality now as we do this kind of housing approach? Anyone want to take a stab at that one? Sandy, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think that we are particularly challenged, and we're not unique, and we are uniquely challenged with a housing market and a housing stock that just does not make it easy for, I mean, we could have all the housing navigators in the world, and if there's no place for people to go, yeah, big problem. So, but what can we do? I mean, I think there are some things that are happening. I believe that we should be looking at, regulatory interventions as well. And we need resources, but also regulatory interventions that allow for tiny homes, for example, to get built. We actually need to build the political will to overcome the backlash that we, as certainly as an elected official, I got it. I imagine you do, Shabra, but continue to get it about building housing. But we have to acknowledge that we cannot. The market is not going to do it. So it's got to be subsidized. But we can also get creative about public lands and regulatory interventions that can help us get. Housing built more cheaply, and I don't mean cheap housing, but housing that is sufficient, right? We don't all need the kind of space that we've become accustomed to. So I think housing matters. Using their campus as an example, I think the city of Santa Cruz is doing that. The county is now looking at investing in properties that currently exist. And this is something that I advocated for. I'm stepping out of my representing Supervisor Cummings' role to say that when I was on the city council, I was looking at distressed properties and saying, why is the city not buying these now, right? I mean, we could, and they were at the time relatively cheap. Well, it doesn't pencil out to have to, to rehabilitate. We want to build new. Well, we tax credits. There's so many problems we can put in the way. But I think we can get creative when it comes to the regulatory environment, letting tiny homes get built and remain in place, we need, and I'll just plug it again, Don, you already did, but I'm going to plug it. We need a stable source of funding to be able to make that happen, local funding. And that's why I'm working on the initiative to get some revenue out of this crazy housing market we're in, where property values are through the roof. We can use a small portion of that to support these big ideas and leverage it to make things happen, right? It doesn't even take a lot in some of these cases. So I want to dream bigger than that even, but I'll leave it there because I think others may want to weigh in.
Thanks. I'm going to call. Do you want to say something, Chris, about that one?
Passing it back so I know that I'm stopping.
Okay.
Well, I think capping rent could be a good idea in order to, because it's just far too expensive for anyone to live in Santa Cruz. Obviously, we have the Silicon Valley nearby, so it does make it a very difficult area. But yeah, going back to the modular housing especially, but also incorporating some mental health assistance at the same time, and also substance abuse assistance. And then that's just a temporary solution before we can get the housing first model underway. That's all.
Jessica?
So first, we need more housing. I mean, that's what we saw here, is we need more housing. We need different housing for different folks. And that's not going to happen right now. And it's a hard market. And I don't mean to be a Pollyanna, but folks are getting housed. And folks are keeping their housing. And we have to be creative and think about what do people have? What sort of resources do people have? What sort of strengths? We've had incredible success with our connectors in working with people and finding out What are their resources? Who could they live with? Who could they go back to? It's not going to help anybody, but it's going to help some folks. Incredible success. We also, not everybody needs to live by themselves. I don't live by myself. Sometimes I wish I lived by myself, but I don't. And so people can do shared housing, and really looking at how do we not silo people who are unhoused into just housing with people who are unhoused, or for very specific, this building is for people who are unhoused. But how do we really have everybody living together? How do we do shared housing? How do we look at our existing housing and use it differently? How do we work together? Again, how do we work together amongst all of us? And it's working. It's not working enough, clearly. And we need to build more partnerships, and we need to figure out how to do this better and differently. But I think it's not a one-size-fits-all. We need to figure out how to create all sorts of different housing types to meet all the different needs.
Nothing motivates someone more than sleeping outside. Today and tonight, I know that someone's going to be freezing to the point where they feel like there's mold growing on their bones, because I've had that coldness. Because I have slept with my child, holding on to them and praying that I can keep them warm enough in my car on the side of the road of Highway 1, right next to those beautiful beach houses. I know that pain. So every time I drive by and I see all the homeless, I know that we could be doing more than talking. Thank you.
If you don't have housing, don't destroy tents. The sweeps are the most acute torture that is happening to homeless people in Santa Cruz. Sweeps happen every single week across the county. Sweeps happen right before the going time count. Sweeps are what you need to stop. If you don't have housing, you need to stop sweeping.
So the film touches on housing policies, and I just wanted to pick that thread that throughout the United States, but certainly here on the West Coast, we've had failed housing policies for decades, and I think that's a huge contributor to where we find ourselves. And I think, well, I want to give some good news before I pose a question to all of us, that we are making some progress. The city has permanently housed 333 people in the last 3 years. That's not that much given how many people are unhoused, but it's 333 people more than was the case before. We are one of 6% in the entire state that have met our regional housing goals, and we were recently given a pro-housing designation. So those are all good things that are helping us move to the right direction. And it's still difficult to build housing, and Sandy, you kind of brought this up. I think we really need to take a look at ourselves, and every time a new housing project comes forward and we say it's too tall or it's too blocky and it's gonna cause traffic and there's not enough parking, I'll include myself in making those comments and being concerned about housing projects that come forward. So I think we need to take a look at ourselves and ask ourselves, like, how are we blocking progress in terms of housing? Our community needs to take a hard look and ask ourselves that question.
I just wonder, you may not, this may be beyond the scope, but did you find that there were some of the communities you went to, and it's hard not to think of San Francisco as one, where this is kind of at the center of their challenge, not that they have a good system, but also that there's such a shortage of housing, really. How do you feel like that kind of interplays with the Housing First solution as you've watched it? How did they grapple with that?
We don't really understand why modular housing isn't, it's like a third of the time to build, and if it's built well, it's very, very livable. And tiny homes, if you build the tiny home and it has its own plumbing, then There's been a big complaint with tiny homes that don't have the plumbing, but if they have their own plumbing and heat and stuff like that, and air, I don't understand really why that's not more of a solution, temporary solutions anyway, to where people can get off the street there, and then you can work on the permanent housing. Communities, Massachusetts is trying to do that. They're trying to go modular building in certain areas. We find that some places have way more robust landlord engagement to get landlords to take on, different incentives. And the more robust that is, there's a statement, there is no affordable housing, but the more robust that is, they create new housing. So that's another way that they deal with it. But you can't really have housing first without any housing. So you have to, and building takes too long, especially in California. So you have to come up with some different solutions. And as far as the NIMBYs go, somebody needs to stand up to them, is really what it comes down to. And it's got to come from the government. There's nothing that can really, there's, in Milwaukee, they had this camp. It was like about 80 people in the camp, and it was in front of some affluent condos and stuff. And there was a meeting, the neighborhood association, and those people that you saw in the film, they went to explain that we are going to house these people. We're not going to just move them down the road or whatever. And they described it as the most nasty things that were said about the people, said about them, all of it. And they just stood there and they took it. And they said, this is the way we're going to do it, though. And so eventually 80 turned into 60, 60 turned into 40. The volume went down with the people who owned the condos. And they said, at the end of the day, it was just they were heard, they got heard, and that's really was the beginning of the cooperation. But, there just has to be some courage when it comes to facing NIMBYs. There's studies out there that say that if you put an affordable housing unit in these neighborhoods where they don't want it, their property values actually go up. There's more than just one. There's a bunch of them. There has to be more, again, courage to confront them and present that evidence. And there's some places in LA that have done that. And we know one place that went up right next to a nursery school. And the parents, of course, they had a big heart attack until it worked out, and now it's all fine. So, and New York has a bunch of them, but it's a big problem.
Great, thank you. So because thank you so much for staying with us. What I'm going to do at this point, before we wrap up, is I just want to just go down one. Is there anything that you want to really say to the community about what you'd like your fellow community members to do now that we're in this moment?
I'd really like to see cooperation between the local government, the authorities, those in the medical field. What was just said, those meetings, the 2-hour meetings, I'd like to see that happen here in Santa Cruz.
Yeah, ditto. I think that is, to me, the idea that, because it brings in the accountability piece too, right? It holds those of us who sit in positions where we're making policy, have decisions over budgets, and the operations of local government. It it makes us accountable too. So I absolutely think that that is one of the most important things we can do, and that community members, you out there, hold our feet to the fire, right? Really, and make us do better, and we will. Thank you.
You guys both said it brilliantly. Stay engaged, stay involved. We want to hear from you. Reach out directly, come to meetings. Tell us what's working, tell us what's not, and be part of the solution and help us co-create what can work. And support the workforce affordable housing measure that's coming before us.
I think it's really important for us to address the immediate needs, right? A lot of these plans talk about 6 months, 8 months, years ahead. And we need to take care of the people immediately. We need to figure out how to house them, and we need not take away what keeps them warm at night. We need to understand that this is a now issue, not a later issue. Thank you.
Here, which one? You don't want me to? You want to say something? No, it's okay. You got it. Okay. We want to be able, well, he has something to say too, but we want to be able to brag about you guys around the country, so we really want you to do this. We really want you to get it together.
And we want to be able to say that you were the ones who got us to do it.
I don't speak much because I'm a camera guy, but I will say that the issue of homelessness, it's a very dark, very hopeless for the most part. When you think about it, it's like there's nothing that can be done. You just drop your hands and you give up. But we traveled all around the country for a year, and we talked to all these people, and we actually, well, I hope that you got it from the movie. We actually walked away with a very optimistic, very hopeful feeling that it can be done. There's so many people, we didn't, how many people made in the movie? I don't know, 60 out of 250, 250? Sorry to all of those who didn't. So many people around the country care about it. They work in this field. They the service providers. There's the church folk. There's even the extreme MAGA people. We were surprised to find that they care about it that much. So we walked away very hopeful, very optimistic that it can be done at the large scale. But looking here, we spent today in Santa Cruz talking to some folks. And we absolutely believe that it can be done here. And all you need to do is just talk to each other and listen to each other. And, even you folks who come and yell at us, we need you.
I think everybody brings something different to this, and so really we need everybody involved, and your different strength, your different resources. We really need everybody involved in this. And so think about what specific thing you can contribute, because we're all going to be able to do it differently. And then also is just have some kindness and give people grace, and this is hard work. And if we are pointing fingers at each other, if we are yelling at each other and we're not listening to each other, we're not going to get anywhere. And to also listen to the wisdom of the people with lived experience and lived expertise. Because, we saw that people know what they need, and they know what their goals are, and we need to listen to that.
Thanks. So I'm going to also answer that question since I get a chance, since I got a microphone, to say that there's, along with whatever else you think you might do to, quote, get involved, there's one thing that was brought up in the movie that just as the magic moment for me. One of the folks who was interviewed said, you know, people were saying, talking shit about someone, and the person said back to them, there's a person in there. So every time you hear that kind of talk about homelessness and people experiencing homelessness, if you do nothing else, don't let that go without reminding the people who say that there's a person there. So with that, could we give a big round of applause for our panel? Thank you so much for your contributions. And this is that moment, if you haven't had a chance, remember a lot of you got the postcard. Think about what you might have to contribute. Take a moment and leave that with us as you go out. We hope that what you've heard tonight will give you both knowledge and inspiration to take back into your daily life and find new ways to get involved. One other thing, we do have a little discussion guide we created to help you continue the conversation at home or with your friends. So take one, drop those postcards in our baskets, and then I just want to tell you real quick, we have a few more events coming up. Housing Matters is either sponsoring or participating in. One is on February 20, I don't know if it's coming up behind me here, February 25th, we have our monthly educational meetup called Neighbors for Neighbors at the intersections, and that'll be at the Branciforte Library, and we look at the intersection between housing insecurity and homelessness with various aspects of individual identity, including race, gender, ability, age, sexuality, and more, and how these identities interact to create unique experiences. And this is a discussion format event, so it's really invites your participation. And then we're going to be doing more of these Neighbors for Neighbors events at various libraries. We've focused on a couple in the past, but now we're moving to a greater array of libraries. So you can register with that QR code. On March 30th, one of our really special events of the year, it's called Picture This, Cultivating Our Compassionate Community, and it's a curated storytelling event that spotlights unique perspectives on what it means to build, sustain, and celebrate a culture of compassion within the context of resolving homelessness. And we have a great lineup of presenters who bring a lot of perspectives on themes of equity and responsibility and power and the honesty and bravery required to advance solutions. So again, there it is up on the screen. And then last on this list, the Sunday, May 4th is the Coalition to End Homelessness's third annual March to End Homelessness in downtown Santa Cruz. It's led by folks with lived experience, local nonprofits, businesses, and other community members. And we march to rally and inspire actionable solutions to homelessness through the advancement of public policy. And this is an event we invite everyone to participate with us. So with that, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Thanks again to our panelists and Don and Tim for making the trip. Have a great evening, and we'll see you out there.
And thank you, John Lane, for all of your work over the years and continuing to get us in the conversation.
Thanks, Andy.